There it is. Yeah.
All right, I have to send out invitations to people on Zoom.
I'm good.
Looks like David, Ann, and Vivian are all in attendees, but I can't move them.
Not until we go live, but because they didn't get, well, Vivian didn't get an email because she's a host, Katie too. So as a host, it says start webinar and they're worried to press start.
So
I'm gonna send them panelist links in 1 second and then we can promote them.
all right.
I'm also going to, let's see. Jay, can you take that pizza out of the oven? Yeah, so it's one of those, they're gonna have to wait a second because I have to get into Zoom. It might need another minute. You'll have to decide. The cheese is melted. Sorry. I'm gonna mute myself.
Do you make the good pizza in the cast iron thing?
I have done that, but this is just on a pizza stone.
I was just wondering if you had the good dough and the good.
We have the Durham dough.
Yum.
Okay. Let's see. So Joe Dulett, you're all set.
I am all set. Someone just needs to let me know when they want this all to be live on all the channels, and I'll let it go.
Yeah, we're gonna need a minute because I'm sure.
Yeah, I'm sure Vivian's freaking.
Yep.
Oh, poor Vivian.
You just text her and tell her.
I did. I said, hang tight. Latania's sending you a link.
Yeah, it's just the panelist thing, and everything's a little bit slow. It's so funny that Zoom was like, "No, we're back to normal."
And you sent something to Katie too?
Yeah, it just takes a second to get there. I have to take, so Vivian, because she's on as an alternative host, it's like blocking her. Okay, edit. So let's see. Katie as well. Does anyone need me to resend them a thing, invitation?
All I see is Katie, Ann, David, and Vivian are texting me.
Is David at New Vista?
Harris.
Oh,
No, David Harris at LBA. Or
okay, I'm resending his link. I have to kick Katie and Vivian off of alternative hosts in order to add them as panelists. So it's something new that Zoom just decided. You cannot be an alternative host and a panelist. So I got to take them off, leave you, save. Now I can add them as panelists. Okay, and then they'll get an email right away. 6:58, we're almost there. Katie, Vivian first. There she is, okay, save.
all right.
Okay, so Vivian's link just got sent to her.
All right.
Now, Katie, anyone else texting you while I'm in this field?
Hey, did you get Ann? It was Katie, Ann, and David. That was it so far.
I sent David a link again because he's always been a panelist. Ann has always been a panelist. And resend.
Greetings.
Greetings.
Hi, Paul.
Latanya, how'd it go today?
Which part?
Which of my many jobs?
New teacher induction.
Oh, it was good. It
Yeah?
was, yeah, it was definitely interesting to have the mask on and do that. Hi, Vivian.
And you're muted.
Not for long.
Sorry.
There it
I
is.
was waiting to see that you're connected and David just joined, so
Great.
perfect.
Katie, loved the survey. Did you get my email?
Yes, thank you so much.
It was great. I did it on my phone, and I had to put in my email address to kind of go through it, but then I deleted it because I don't get a say.
Good to know.
But it was fun flipping through. I think it looks great.
Oh, good.
I can't believe you did that so fast.
All right. So Vivian, I believe as a co-host, you're going to be able to unmute people and allow them to speak.
Perfect.
Suzanne is also a co-host. Katie's going to be a co-host. Anybody else?
David, you are in here twice. Is there a reason?
I certainly didn't want to be.
And I would think David would need to be a co-host as well so that he could broadcast.
Great. All right, David, co-host.
Co-host.
Lots of co-hosts tonight.
Okay.
See, Rebecca's joined us. Oh, that's why. She was using my link. She's using my link, so that's why she.
All right, so it's 7:01. Do we want to broadcast?
Should I?
Yeah. Okay, let's
So
go.
it says you're in a practice session. Attendees cannot join until you start the webinar.
So yeah, this is every single week, and I'm going to press broadcast, but when we press it too early, oh, somebody pressed it.
I did not.
When we press it too early, we go live. So now we're live on Facebook, and then Joe Dulett.
You're live on Zoom. I'll put you live on Facebook, YouTube, and the channel if you want me to do it now.
We're ready.
Thank you so much, Joe.
Got it.
Hello, hello, and welcome. Welcome to our community forum. We are so excited to have you here. It is really great to see the attendees numbers like bouncing up right now. We're at 20 and climbing, so that's awesome. Thank you so much for taking your time right now to come in to be a part of this. We're going to have a survey that is going to allow you to give your input, like what you think is the best option, so that as the school building committee, we can narrow down, because right now we have 6 choices and that is too many. And so based on community feedback, we are going to narrow those 6 choices down. So we're really excited to hear your comments and to hear your questions and hopefully answer some of those questions. But just really thank you for taking the time to join us tonight, whether you're here on the Zoom or on Facebook or on the YouTube channel. We really appreciate your time and really appreciate your feedback. You will be seeing this survey show up a few more times probably. You're hopefully going to be getting a mailer about it pretty soon with a survey on it. You're going to get a chance to do the survey tonight. And it just goes through what the options are and allows you to make your own informed decision. And that's really what we're looking for, is to get some feedback from the town. And it's wonderful to have so many people here tonight on this kind of hot and blustery evening. So thank you so much for joining us. We're at 30 people now, which is great. That's so great for our Zoom webinar. Hopefully a few more people will join us. We're going to do it a little bit differently tonight. It's exciting. We're going to get to hear your voices, so that will be awesome. I'm sure Vivian will talk a little bit more about that, but we just, again, thanks for being here. Thanks for being a part of this. Thanks for helping us make some choices about what's best for our town and what's best for the elementary students in terms of how are we going to find a place to put them, to have them have a great education.
So Katie, if you want to take a moment to just kind of, for all the attendees that are here tonight, thank you again. And I'll reiterate exactly what Katie said. Don't want to repeat too much, but we will have portions of this presentation tonight where we definitely want to hear from you. And we ask that you use the raise hand button found on Zoom, and we'll grant you permission to speak, because we definitely want to hear from all of you tonight.
So if you are not on the Zoom call tonight, if you are watching us through Facebook or you are watching us through the YouTube channel, please send an email to sbc@swampscottps.org, or you can call or text 617-821-5075, and we will answer the questions through either of those means as well. If you're on the Zoom call, as Vivian said, you can raise your hand and we will actually get to hear your voice asking your question, and we will answer it live right there. So if you're on one of the other systems, please use the email or please use the text, and we will get to that. We will get to your questions as well. And if you're here on Zoom, can't wait to hear your question.
Hi, everybody. Thank you again for joining us tonight as we begin our presentation tonight. I'm Vivian Verbedian from Hill International as the owner's project manager. Along with me from Hill International, we have Paul Callis, as well as the design team led by Lee Sherwood, David Harris as the project manager, and Ann Keller as the community facilitator. We're all excited to be here tonight, and this is one of the rare opportunities that we want to definitely hear from you as the Swampscott community and on what are your options and what is it that you like most and least about these 6 options that we have tonight. We always start off with a project schedule. We want to make sure that you are kept up to date as far as what the timing is for this project. We have submitted our preliminary design documents to the MSBA, and we are waiting to hear from you as we move forward into an October submission for the preferred schematic report to the MSBA. From there, they'll have an opportunity to review these documents, give their feedback, and allow us to move forward into the process. We want to hear from you up until the September timeframe that we have in preparation for the October preferred schematic report on when we start narrowing down these choices from 6 and going down to our preferred option. That is why tonight's presentation and your involvement is so crucial and vital.
Okay, so I just want to reiterate. So first of all, hello everyone, and I want to reiterate what Vivian and Katie just said, which is that tonight is all about hearing from you. So this should be pretty exciting and hopefully fun. So exciting, so fun, and so important that we're actually not going to do just one session, but we're going to do 2 sessions. So we're going to go through this tonight, and then we're also going to have a follow-up after Labor Day on September 8th. To repeat everything tonight in order to get as many opinions, hear as many voices from the community as possible. So that's coming up on September 8th. So if you know someone who couldn't be here tonight, please let them know that it's super fun and actually really important for this school in your town. And then on September 22nd, we're going to have another meeting, a follow-up to talk about what we heard from you and the preferred designs that we're going to be reviewing. So that's once we've narrowed it down, we'll come back to you and discuss that. If you want to learn more, please go to the SBC website. You can look at all of our previous presentations where we dig into topics more specifically. But for now, let's get started. So David, if you would just advance to the next slide, please. This is all about hearing from you. Tonight is about your input. So we're gonna try to get from you what your preferences really are. And to do that, we want to back up and look at the 6 options. So David, if you just go to the next slide, please. The 6 options, 6 sounds like a lot, and it kind of is, but it's easier when you think about it in terms of 3 categories with 2 options per category. So we know that our partner in this project is the MSBA. And early on in this process, the MSBA and the town of Swampscott decided on 4 enrollments, and we narrowed them down to 3. And so for each enrollment option, each enrollment category rather, we have 2 options. So the first one is Hadley Only. And what that means is it's about 1/3 of the town. And so it's that catchment area that sends their students to the Hadley School. And the first option for that category is an addition renovation of existing Hadley. The second one is to tear down existing Hadley and build a brand new school. But again, that's just for the 1/3 of the town. The next category is district-wide grades 3 through 5. So that's the entire town for grades 3 through 5. And the two options are basically an option for a site on the existing Hadley. So we'd tear down existing Hadley and put a new 3 through 5 there, or we'd build the 3 through 5 in option 2 on the middle school site. Our last category is district-wide K through 4. And these options are both at the Stanley site. However, option 1 is a 3-story school and option 2 is a 2-story school. And if you're curious why we would put two seemingly similar options up to you for your ideas and your comments, is because there really is a difference in a building that's 3 stories versus 2 stories. For example, a 3-story building has a smaller footprint, and so therefore the site has more open green space. Well, but a 2-story building has more program on the ground floor. So these are things that you should be thinking about as the options are presented to you tonight. So David, if we just go to the next slide, here we are with community priorities. You've heard me talk about community pillars, which really are community priorities. What we want to talk about here is we want to ask you, when you look at all 6 options, to look at them through the lens of each one of these priorities, because they are essentially goals developed by your town. So in the last 7 months that we've been working closely with your administrators and your community members, we've been able to get information from you to understand what your goals for this building truly are. And we distilled them into 4 distinct categories. The first one is education. Now, you may remember, I think it was last spring, we had a community forum with David Stevens. He's an educational planner who worked directly with your teachers and your terrific superintendent, Pam, to really understand what the goals for education in the town of Swampscott are. They are supports equity and inclusion, meaning that every student gets the same resources and great education, aligns grades district-wide. So what that means is that every student, for example, in kindergarten or 3rd grade, are under one roof, getting the same resources in the same building. The next is creates small learning neighborhoods, very important for small kids in primary school, improves scheduling and resource efficiency, and lastly, provides creative, flexible, adaptive spaces. The next category is site and traffic. Swampscott is about 15,000 people in 3.5 square miles. So Swampscott is dense. That means that the residents of your town, you're sharing the roads and you're sharing the sidewalks, and that there isn't a ton of land. And so any kind of change that we make by adding a school, we have to be super careful about the effect that has on the entire town. In order to understand what your goals and priorities are, not only did we listen to you, but we engaged a traffic engineer. She's with us tonight. And the goals that we understood from you, I'll read them quickly, are first, improve local traffic patterns. That would be great, wouldn't it? Proximity to student families, safe for walking and biking, super important. And lastly, good on-site queuing and parking. Our next category is sustainability. We worked not only with our engineers, but also with the subcommittee on sustainability to understand what it means to be green in a town like Swampscott, because we know that the environment matters to you. And what we learned is that you want your new school, this project, whichever option it may be, to have the following goals: respects open space and natural resources, is easy to maintain and an energy efficient facility, healthy, safe, and durable, makes perfect sense, practical use of daylight and renewable energy, and lastly, connects learners to the natural environment. And our final category, our final pillar, if you will, is community. We know that a school is a place that affects the entire town, and so it needs to be a truly community building. And so the goals for this community through this project are appropriate scale and character. We want it to fit in to the town of Swampscott. That's important to you, and we're going to make sure that it does, whichever option you choose. Adjacent community amenities, centrally located for easy access, and lastly, encourages use by entire community. So in a moment, Lee is going to walk you through all 3 categories and the 2 options per category. And what we want you to do tonight, what's critical to the project at this juncture, is for you to think about each option as it relates to these 4 priorities. And Lee's going to talk about that. So with that, Lee, I'm just going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Anne. That was a great explanation of all the things we've been through and what we feel are important. So what I'll do today is I will go through these 3 different categories of options and try to express what we have learned about each one and how they resolve each of these issues and pillars. So as Anne said, the very first page that we're looking at is 2 options about Hadley only. And of course, what that means is that you still have 3 elementary schools, and Hadley would be a newly renovated or brand new one. But that means that Clark remains the K through 4 and Stanley remains the K through 4, but they are essentially untouched in this option. Something for you to think about. With the MSBA, one of our options will always be renovation addition. They always want to see what it means to just add on to what you have. So option 1 is taking the old or original building on the Hadley site and then adding on enough of the new addition to make it match the program. I will tell you that the program with the MSBA for just the Hadley School is a solid 20,000 square foot larger than Hadley is now. So you have to add on to it regardless. The other interesting thing is it turns out that when we go through and we renovate the school, the renovated portions are actually a little more expensive than building new. If that doesn't make sense to you, it doesn't make sense altogether to everyone. But remember, what we're doing here is not just bringing the building up a little bit and painting it. We're trying to create a whole building for the next 50 years. So with a renovation, there's a lot of work to do, and it's actually often easier to build it new in order to meet the criteria of a modern building. So if you look at option 1, you'll see that almost nothing is listed under that symbol for education. That's because with the existing building, many of the spaces are too small. It's really, really difficult for us to get them next to each other in the right way. Even the gymnasium, if we are built to build it on here, we're putting that underneath the new building, because if we don't, it'll fill up the entire site. It's kind of inefficient. Obviously, it also doesn't, create too much equity. For traffic, all of the Hadley project sites essentially do the same thing. Hadley is in a really good location downtown, and there's a lot of walkers and families with walkers nearby. So it's actually a really good location. It's our job to improve the queuing and the traffic. And with our traffic engineer for this basic site, we want to take Reddington and make it essentially a one-way road with 2 lanes and create as much drop-off and queuing on site as possible to get the cars off. We don't have a lot of parking room on this particular site. Some people have suggested building underneath a parking deck, and that's always a possibility. But there are locations nearby where we think we can get some parking. There's good there's healthy and safe opportunities for this building. There's about 13,500 square feet of play space on the site, but you also have Linscott Park for all of these options. And even currently, all of the children use Linscott Park all the time. So our play space will essentially be a playground. And that's the existing building. The new building of the exact same program and enrollment is a little different. First of all, we're able to make smaller learning neighborhoods. If you look at the shape on option 2, there's a wing on one side and on the other side. And those are both smaller learning neighborhoods, 3 stories high. So you get to take all the kids and break them down into smaller pieces so that they feel more comfortable. And all the stuff in the middle, the cafetorium, the gym, the library, all that stuff is in the center, is shared by all. So it's essentially kind of a vertical building, although because it's K through 4, the kindergarten is on the first floor and have direct access out to the playground. And it has a pretty good face to the community. If you look at how it kind of bends and creates a little place out front, you can imagine walking down the street and kind of feeling that. And that the cafetorium actually is in the back and opens up to the park. So that's a wonderful plan. Again, it allows us with a new building to put the spaces where we want them to be for maximum use by the educators. Same walkability and all of that. It is a new building, so it is much more energy efficient than an existing building because we get to put in the right insulation and all of the different things like that. It is healthy and safe, and we're able to really control windows and daylighting. Because it's new, we get to put PVs on the roof and maybe even do geothermal underneath. And that will help with renewable energy. And it has essentially the same amount of play space, maybe even a little more. And lastly, we feel that with any of these buildings, we can create them in the downtown character and scale of the brick buildings. And because they're adjacent to community activities, Lynn Scott Park and downtown, we feel like the location is prime for everyone in the community to use the building on off hours. Next. The next level of options is the idea of a district-wide 3 through 5. Now this is very interesting. On option 1 on the left is at the Hadley School, and option 2 on the right is essentially the same building, a little bit different shape, but on the middle school site. And if we do a district-wide 3 through 5, you're starting to go down the path, a phased path of creating grade-aligned schools. So this would take all the 3 through 5th graders in the entire district into one place. Now that means that for the time being, Clark stays at K through 2, and Stanley both of them become a K through 2. They're the right size for that right now, but they again will not have any renovations in our project here. They would have to be in the future, but it does work if we did this. It aligns the grades. So in option 1, we have 540 students. You may notice that that floor plan or that footprint you're looking at is very similar to what we were just looking at for the new building K through 4, which had less students. Essentially, we just added another floor, so it's 4 stories instead of 3 stories. That's a very efficient way of making more space. It will have wings on each side for small learning opportunities. And it brings, because it's a district 3 through 5, all the special educators and all the people who just work with 3 through 5 will be in that building. So they don't have to go back and forth between different buildings. It's a wonderful location downtown. Something very interesting about having 3 through 5 downtown. They're a little bit older, and maybe they can make even more use of the downtown area than the little ones. We're not really that worried about having a 4-story building for 3 through 5th graders because they're a little older. So imagine this building being on the first floor being all the community spaces, and on the 2nd, 3rd, and 4th floor, those are the neighborhoods for the 3rd, 4th, and 5th kids. So by the time you get to 5th grade, you're on the 4th floor and you're looking at the harbor. It's wonderful. And we think that's very connective. It is energy efficient. We'll have daylighting, renewable energy, and the play space is about 16,000 square feet. Essentially the same building over at the middle school is option 2. Where we're putting this is right on top of where the tennis courts are. And we put it back there to stay away from the middle school so that there's plenty of options for renovating. We're building a new middle school in the future. But we do have to get back there with access roads and with utilities. And we're also removing the tennis courts and maybe affecting the field next to it. And in your town, very difficult to find another location to replicate those play spaces. But still, this building in that area would do all the other things that the 3 through 5 at Hadley would do. aligning grades, small neighborhoods, be flexible. It's a good building for education. The middle school is not a bad place for traffic and walkability. It's actually very central to where many, many families live. The real question is about queuing, and if we create a new access road off Nason, maybe we can create longer queuing lines off site. And there's more room for parking on this site than in other places. So it has its advantages, but like all of them, none of them seem to be quite perfect. It has plenty of open space. And because it's a new building, we can make it very energy efficient and meet all those demands. Lastly, it's adjacent to the fields, so it's near the community. And in terms of all of the wetlands and the forests and stuff nearby, those are great things for the kids and for the community to use. So that's what it would be like. That's really the choice if you like district-wide 3 through 5 as an option. Next. So lastly, as you can see, we're going with small, larger, and the largest scheme. District-wide K through 4 means that you would take all of the elementary school students in the entire town from K through 4 and put them in one location. Clearly, that would meet the terms of equity because every single kid would have the same resources and all of that. It also aligns all the grades at once. So it's not necessarily a phased plan, it's really the plan. And then you can focus on other levels of schools. If we do this school right here, if you look at option 1, this is the Stanley site. The Stanley site, after all of our looking at options and locations and sites, was the only one that could legitimately hold a K through 4 for up to 900 students. It has enough land to do this. No other location really did. So this is the right place to do that particular scheme. In that option, Stanley would be taken down after the new building is built. And then Clark would probably become a pre-K and administrative offices, giving a little more space to the middle school. Now, what is different between these two? On the left, on option 1, it's a brand new school, but it's 3 stories tall. Now, why do we do 3-story elementary schools quite often? So does the MSBA. They're a little bit taller than many of the schools built in the 50s, 60s, and 70s. And in the past, though, of course, schools were more urban and taller. We are finding that it's more energy efficient because it has less wall. It is more oftentimes easier to construct, and it gives you more land to deal with. But it's a little taller than another one, and we really have to understand that. Our approach to any of these 2 options on Stanley is to have the access on Whitman, which on this drawing is at the very top, as one of the accesses. And you can choose to have 1 access and have the 2 drop off. So what we do is we break up the plan into a lower school, K through 2, and an upper school on the other side of the plan, 3 through 4. We have a drop off in a courtyard on one side, and then you go around the building or access through another location, and there's an entry and a drop off on the other side for 3 through 4. What that essentially does, if you're in one of those, is it splits, not quite in half, but it splits the population into 2 smaller schools. And then the center has all the larger shared resources. The cafetorium, which is quite large, the gymnasium, the media center, all those wonderful things in the center can be used by everyone, which is very efficient. And it's a place where the different age kids can actually cross paths. But the truth is that if you're in the lower school, like in kindergarten, you drop off, you go into your own lobby, into your own little world on the first floor and out to the play. If you're in the 3rd, 4th grade, you go to that side. So it's a wonderful way to try to create what we would call a twin school, something that's fairly popular. The if you look around at the site, you'll see that we were able to get quite a bit of parking, 80 parking spaces. We could probably get more out of 220 that we would like to have. It's a wonderful site for walkability. It's very central in town. It has great daylighting and sunlight and orientation. And believe it or not, remember we were talking about something like 16,000 square feet over at Hadley, because that's a very urban site. Well, this site with a 3-story building has 74,000 square foot of play area. I'm not counting the roads and the parking. So if you look at the field and the patio and the play areas in back, that is a wonderful amount of play area for the different age kids to have their own spaces. Plus, there's Ewing Woods at the bottom of the page, which is going to be preserved as a conservation land and as a place for the kids to explore. On the right, which is option 2, what we've done is we've taken the same building and we've made it a 2-story building. I know that there's some questions about whether a 2-story building is more appropriate with all the 2-story houses around and all of that. I would say that it's really up to you, but that we have employed stepping and scale and different size build, different ways to make something feel smaller, 1-story and or stepping, so that a 3-story school can feel smaller. But as you can see, with a 2-story school, the footprint gets quite a bit larger. It's kind of like you just blew up a balloon a little bit more, right? The amount of play space has gone down about 14 or 15,000 square feet. And you can see that the play field itself is quite skinny in this option. And we've lost some play space because all the other stuff has to remain the same. The K through 2 lower school is essentially the same, but 2 stories, and the upper school is also the same. If we were to look at the floor plans, I think the 3-story option lays out better for creating small learning communities, because in this option, you kind of have to put 2 grades on the same floor, which isn't as ideal. Actually, more kids in one area. So really, both of them do wonderful things for the site, and it's really for everyone to judge character and scale. The community amenities will be similar. There's just less space, and it's a slightly different arrangement of a building. In the end, these are, if we go to the next page, these are the 6 options paired up that we would look at. I would suggest that when you start talking about it and thinking about it, you think about, do you like the enrollment options, which is Hadley 3 through 5 or K through 4, and then you look at the site and its ability to carry those different options and what's best for your town. Now, which of these options reflects who you are as a community and which of them helps you best into the future. At this point, we would also like to say that anyone who doesn't really want to engage in discussion or really doesn't necessarily want to give feedback can go directly to the online survey, which is at the bottom of this page. I took it a little bit earlier today, kind of brings you through these same things, asks you a little more about sustainability. And in the end, you can give us your feedback. This is essential for us. We need your feedback, and we look forward to your questions in the next bit. So I'm really finished here. Does anyone want to jump in and get the next phase started?
Sure. We'd love to open it up to any questions or comments that the public might have. Please do use the raise hand function if you are on Zoom. And if you're watching us on Facebook Live or any other means of social media, please follow us on either the email address or the telephone number. I do have a few people that have already raised their hands. I'll give it a second to see if there's anybody else. But
Great, thank you, Vivian. I also have some incoming questions via email and text.
Excellent. So, Michael,
why don't we start with the first texted message, which comes from Inza Sheehan, as mom of Clark's 2nd grader, says, please describe in greater detail how pickup, drop-off, parking would work at Hadley for the district-wide 3 through 5 option? And what is the anticipated start and finish date of whichever project is selected?
Good questions. So the way that obviously when you have a 3 through 5, you're going to have to start, and now that you have K through 2, 3 through 5, and then middle school, the district will have to go and think about the scheduling of drop-offs and pickups, so that maybe K through 2 is first, or middle school is first, and then 3 through 5, and then K through 2, so that if you have a child in 2 different schools, you have that 10 or 15 minutes in between to go from one to another. Don't know if that's your question, but that is important.
I think, Lee, you might also want to give reference to what we covered in the traffic study about different configurations for Remington Street potentially.
Yeah, so you mean at the Hadley site?
For the Hadley site, yes.
Right. So the traffic engineer who is here observed and did studies at all of the sites, and at the Hadley site felt that by changing a couple of the in streets into Reddington to a different direction or one way out or something, and by making Reddington one way from the right to the Humphrey Street, and making that 2 lanes both one way, that it would allow people to queue up on the street and then off onto our site, and people could still pass by, and felt like that was a much better approach to that area. It could just be during school time, but really it probably could work just fine the other way. Parking is a challenge, as we said before. We were looking at the flat parking site over at the Archdiocese for an idea of some parking there, and that's something the town is pursuing. And of course, you could have some found parking along the street and all of that. Lastly, you could explore parking underneath the building and see if you can get some, it would be fairly expensive underground parking, but it may be that in Swampscott, that is worth the price.
There was also the second part of the question about when likely start-stop portion of the project might be.
Let's hear that from Vivian.
Yeah, appropriate for Vivian, perhaps?
Absolutely. So as we enter into selecting this, we anticipate the town's vote. David, if you wouldn't mind advancing to the schedule page. Thank you. So in September of 2021, we anticipate having everyone's voices be heard through the district approval vote. After that, we will be entering into design development phase, which will take another about a year, so 2022, for development of DDs as well as construction documents, and into construction. We anticipate another about year to 18 months of construction. So the project won't really be come to a conclusion roughly in 2024 timeframe.
Great. I had another question that came in by text from Gail, who asks, are the costs that you've been discussing construction costs or total project costs?
They were both. I'll answer that really quickly. We did provide both costs. We broke it down into the project cost for construction, as well as included the overall project cost to it as well.
Great, thank you very much. Lee, you're on mute.
Apologize for that. If you look at the drawings, go back one drawing, please. You will see up in the corner there of each of these options, it says project. We were very careful to give you a range of project costs so that you would have everything that the building would cost, the whole project would cost, including fees and everything.
Great, thanks. All right, let's move on to some of the Zoom attendees, and I'll keep an eye on text, email, and any other incoming messages. Jason Statlander. Just unmute yourself, Jason.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, so I actually have two questions. For the two district-wide options, would there be any possible one-way street traffic changes for those, given the quantity of students that would be passing through there? I mean, I know how tight some of those streets are they're talking about. And the other question is, what would they do with the students for Hadley during construction? Because it doesn't look like they're planning to do the construction in Linscott Park and then swap places or anything. So I'm just kind of curious there.
Well, I think what I was going to do is I was going to answer the Hadley question first. And then we'll have our traffic engineer discuss your first question about traffic at the district-wide. So for Hadley, if we were doing the new school, and really the renovation as well, if you go, let's go to 3 through 5 or one of those, doesn't really matter. Thank you, on the left. Then you would need to get all of the kids who are currently at Hadley somewhere else for at least a year, maybe a year and a half. And and what we did in terms of swing space right now is we put those temporary classrooms, and we would put some over at Stanley to hook into the systems there and to be like right there. And then we might put a couple over by the middle school, because there's actually some room there where you could have some older kids maybe. And that is a way to get the kids to a place where, one, they're part of another school, so they have gymnasium and cafeterias and all that kind of stuff for that time. They have those portable classrooms, which are actually quite good these days, and they'd be hooked up and there'd be extra bathrooms and things like that. That felt better than trying to keep them on site and move everybody around all the time for safety, for disruption, and for everything else. Lastly, we felt like if we did a new school over at Hadley and we took down the old building first, it would actually be a lot easier to build having a blank site there than having to work around a lot of other options. That was our take on it. It is open to change, but we felt like that was probably the best approach. Now let's go to Stanley site K through 4. Mike, can you reread that section of it so that Rebecca can answer that question?
Actually, it wasn't a read.
That was,
I can restate it if you want.
Jason's still on.
Yeah, I was.
You wouldn't mind restating your second part of your question?
Sure.
Thanks,
I was just saying with both of the district-wide options, the one located over at the middle school and the one replacing Stanley, would there be any possible changes to the neighborhoods in that area to one-way traffic flows, given the size of the streets? I would think especially Stanley, because if you're talking about 900 students attending over in that area, it could be really tight.
Absolutely. If I can, I'm going to try and share my screen with you just to show you kind of an early schematic drawing that we had that shows some of the surrounding streets that are a little bit different than what was presented. Looks like I might not be able to do that.
Hold on, Rebecca. Let me try to give you hosting ability.
All right.
So, I don't think I can. I think all of the hosting abilities have rights have already been provided.
Suzanne needs to provide it as the main host.
Well, Rebecca, I think you'll have to just describe it.
Okay.
Everybody knows.
Yeah, I can just kind of talk through it. That's fine. I was just hoping.
Sorry, I'm doing it right now. I'm
Oh,
sorry.
great,
It's like, all right, you should be able to do it now.
All right, let's see.
Then will you just make me back a host when you're done?
Yes, I can do
Thanks.
that. Oh, it looks like it's still disabled, but that's okay. I can talk through. So right now there's some one-way traffic flow that happens around the Stanley School. between, I believe it's 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. is approximately the hours that it happens, where traffic comes in Orchard Circle, and then it's a kind of one-way traffic flow around Nason Road and then out Orchard Road back out onto Humphrey Street. And again, that's a time of day thing. And there's some signage out there that shows, do not enter onto Orchard Road between 7 a.m. and 3 p.m. But I think it's difficult for people to see it and understand what's going on there. So we would look to actually formalize that one-way traffic flow through Orchard Circle, Orchard Road, and part of Nason Road as well. What that would actually do is provide some parking back to the neighborhood as well, because right now that area is being used for parents to actually park and then walk their students onto the school campus at Stanley School. With the new K-4 school options, parents would actually be able to drive their vehicles onto the school property and be able to drop kids off right at the front of the building and then go back out. So really that parking area goes back to the neighborhood now, but it also allows us to provide some wider sidewalks for kids walking to school without having to take down any of the trees in that area, because right now although there are sidewalks along both sides of all of those streets, there are some very, very large trees that are blocking access to the sidewalks. So by making those one-way roadways, we can keep the traffic circulating, kind of similar to a roundabout pattern, and we can provide some wider sidewalks that don't require us to take down trees and get kids into the school. With the the 3 through 5 option that would happen on the middle school site, we wouldn't be changing any of the two-way patterns on any of the streets around the school, but we would create a one-way connection between the end of Nason Road going through the play fields at the back of the middle school and connecting down over to the tennis court to create an additional drop-off. Now, there would be also a connection from the middle school down to the 3 through 5 school as well, so that parents who have kids in both schools could drop off at the middle school, drive down the hill, drop off at the 3 through 5 school and come out. So there would be a one-way connection added there, but otherwise all of the streets would remain two-way as they are today around the 3 through 5 school.
Jason, I hope that answered your question.
It does. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much, Jason, and thanks, folks. David Townsend.
David, you're allowed to speak now.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Hi, thanks very much. I wanted to raise a couple of things, really some opinions and viewpoints. I'm not sure how much institutional memory there may be from the last time we went through this, and how much that experience is influencing this process. Because the outcome last time and the overall process, frankly, turned out to be a big waste of time, since we had no results and it took years. And we're sort of back at square one by doing this. I'm hoping that there were lessons learned and lessons retained from what happened before. It's great that you're having this process, the other processes that are transparent and inviting community input. If you know anything about what this town's been going through with respect to a new trash policy, there's some major complaints and concerns that was not done in a very transparent manner. And so this is, it's a positive process, but the reality is that a tiny fraction of the town is paying attention at this point. And no matter how many forums like this or other forms of information you try to provide, a very large portion of the town will not really be paying attention all the way up until you get to the townwide vote. And again, that's what happened last time. And what happened was that the town was presented with a single option, yes or no, with no further chance to amend it at that point. And it overwhelmingly voted against it. Both the town meeting and the town as a whole voted against it. And the reason, well, among many, but I think the biggest reason was a very prevalent sentiment against the idea of a single town-wide elementary school, which was what was proposed. It was going to be at the middle school site, and it was going to be K through 4, I guess. And many people wanted to preserve the notion of neighborhood schools, preserve smaller schools, be able to walk their kids to school, or at least have a relatively short drive. And so, again, regardless of other arguments or pros and cons, when it was a simply yes or no on that single option, the town overwhelmingly said no, and we lost 5 years worth of work, maybe even 10 if you add it all together. I think it's important to keep in mind that the same kind of thing could happen here. In particular, if either of the two town-wide Stanley options were to be ultimately adopted, you can make all the arguments that you like, that it's the right way to go for this or that reason. I'm convinced the town wouldn't go for it. I also personally wouldn't go for it. I think you're downplaying the traffic factor immensely. On those options, you put the bullet point improves traffic. I mean, arguably it improves traffic at the micro level because you can drive around the school, as we were just explained. But for people who live way on the other side of town, who currently go to Clark, and having to drive all the way over to Stanley every single morning at 8 o'clock, it's going to be a half-hour, 45-minute round trip at least. And you're going to have backups all along Salem Street, Humphrey Street, Forest Ave. It's going to be a congested nightmare. And that's putting aside other concerns about students being in one place and everything else. So in my mind, and also when you describe the Renovate Hadley option 1, clearly that is inferior to replacing Hadley as the option among those two. So in my, we're really only looking at 3 options: the 2 district-wide 3 to 5 ones, and the replace Hadley option. You may hear other opinions from other people. I urge you to keep in mind what happened before, and to try to get the sense of what the town really is willing to support when we've
been trying, obviously, to learn from what has happened in the past. Which of the options at this very moment, if you were to go on the survey, do you think that you would feel the most comfortable after you just spoke supporting?
Probably the replace Hadley option. There's a lot of questions that go with that, because the town's going to want to also, do other things to upgrade Clark and Stanley, but we're not talking about that tonight. So if I had to just pick one option, that would be the first.
Thank you.
So Vivian, can you clarify for the audience the question of Renovate Hadley and why the committee is still looking at that?
It is required under the MSBA that we carry that option, even though it might not necessarily be the desired one for the school building committee. But for the MSBA, we do need to carry that option, since they like to understand if we have reviewed all of them and have given thoughtful consideration to renovating instead of completely building new.
Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that people understood that there was some outside consideration for having that piece in place. David, thank you. I'm going to move on if that's okay with you.
Yeah, thank you very much.
The next person with a hand up is someone with the initials MRE. I'm hopeful that when you speak, you will introduce yourself to us.
Hi, hi, I'm sorry, I just signed on quickly, but my name is Marie Robertson Epstein, and I live over on Lewis Road, and I'm concerned about the extensive structure of Stanley and the change it will inflict on the residential quality of the neighborhood, as well as the impact of the traffic and lighting on the Ewing Woods, the wildness of that. It's a very small woods. And right now, it's unimpacted by a smaller structure and less traffic, but that would be not only an impact to that, but all these neighborhoods around here, because it's close. The neighborhood is close to that structure.
Thank you. Any comments, Lee, in terms of light pollution, et cetera?
Well, starting with that, I mean, obviously we are environmental architects. We would do everything we can and have to, believe it or not, to protect both Ewing Woods and the other wetlands around the site. Ewing Woods would not be physically touched in any way, it would be preserved. I don't know if having a building, the size of the building really impacts Ewing Woods in terms of, you know, I don't think there's like magnetic energy or something, you know, I mean, I don't think, and we're staying away from it a little bit, obviously, and keeping our distance. In terms of light, all of our light fixtures nowadays, and everything we choose, have to be dark sky lighting, meaning that everything has to be low and has to be pointed directly down, and we have to do photometric studies to prove that none of the light spills or can be seen as like a bulb from a neighbor or from another spot. So I think that through the technical aspects of it, I don't think we would damage or impact Ewing Woods, and I think that light pollution will actually, I would guess it would be less than you have now, because we would have all new fixtures that are compliant. I'm not trying to desensitize to those, because those are really, really great questions. And we share your concern about wildlife and the environment. Was there another piece of that?
Well, I also thought the traffic, I mean, you have roads running close by, and the use would be extensive for the whole town to be driving in and out of there and all kinds of programs. So I thought not just lighting, but traffic and the human impact of on that site.
Yeah, I think that's legit. And it's funny, we brought Rebecca, our traffic engineer, and she sees these and she works on them. She actually worked on Stanley a few years ago and widened the entry and stuff, so she knows the site. But sometimes you can have someone, this is nothing about you, Rebecca, but sometimes you can have somebody say, these are the counts, this is fine, it'll be this, it'll be that. But then people who live there will just say, I don't really think that's going to happen that way. And so we understand there's kind of there's a reality to it that is hard to overcome. I would say this, that at any of these sites, and especially Stanley, in order to make it work, the idea was to get all of those cars off of the streets. In other words, if you look at the site plans, we actually have cars coming onto the site and queuing. You can get, you know, hundreds and hundreds of feet of car lines on the site and then out again. That means that instead of people coming in, parking, and walking their kids onto the site, literally parking all over the streets, all around, you now have people just moving through, coming through, and then back out again and leaving. I would urge you all to kind of visualize that, and how we've opened up the flow and gotten all those cars off the street. And while you can count the number of cars, they're actually moving. And so that's not saying it's all better or anything like that, because it's definitely more cars than there have been. But it is quite a different idea than what you're doing now, and how kind of, it's a little bit chaotic, let's face it. Thank you.
Yeah, Lee, you did note one of the things that I was going to mention too, about how today there's, because the parents aren't allowed to come onto the Stanley property, everyone's parking out in the neighborhoods. And so a lot of the traffic and congestion that's happening right now is parking maneuvers in and out of the parking spaces, and parents crossing the road with their kids walking into the school from those parking areas. And with the new layout of the Stanley School and parents being able to drop off right on site, all of that component of the congestion will go away, so that traffic will be just moving at a slower pace coming in and back out of the school. And all of that, the parking and the drop off and the kids walking, all that happens right on the site itself.
I will say that at the middle school, they have a drive-through, but the way it works is that people pull up close, let the kid off, and either do a U-turn, and the kid crosses the street in front of cars. So they have the drive-through, but doesn't always work according to plan. Since the parents want to get out of the line, they don't want to go through it. They still drop the kid off close.
Yep, I will definitely agree with you on that one. So when we did our observations, we noted a number of issues that were happening at the middle school, where because of the layout of the crosswalks that require kids to cross the traffic that's trying to get into the school property at two different locations, it creates a pretty long backup along Forest Avenue going off to the west from the school. And because of that, a lot of parents aren't even pulling onto the school property. They're just dropping off out on the street and kind of making a U-turn and coming right back out again. Other parents are going onto the site, and it's taking a really long time. So we've made some recommendations to the town for things that they should change there regardless of whatever happens, even if a school doesn't happen on the middle school site. That would really help their traffic flow in that area.
Also at Stanley School currently, the parents drop their kids off at the the end of Forest Ave where the Unitarian church is. There's a turnaround there. Yep. And a lot of them will drop it off there, and sometimes they park and the kid can go right through that way. So there's going to be access from that way as well, if that's the option.
Yeah, Marie, I think that one of the reasons that people are doing all that is because it's not really resolved at Stanley School. I mean, the idea that there's no real drop off on site and it's been set up that way, it doesn't allow people to flow, so they get stuck. And I don't blame all the parents for trying to find ways around that. So all we can do is, listen, whether this is the option or not, all we can do is have people who do this for a living really figure out how the flow should work to make it methodical, smooth, and continuous during those 2 times of day that this happens.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lindsay Polisotti. You'll need to unmute.
Okay. I just wanted to say I have been attending all the meetings over the last few months, or starting at the beginning of the year, and I'm really impressed with all the designs you came up with. For me as a teacher in the district, I teach at the middle school. I'm definitely leaning more towards the district-wide options, because I really think the equitability for students and having all of your students in one grade on the same site experiencing the same types of learning, and the breakout spaces that you have and that community you can create, I think really can't be done at the different schools. And it really just makes an equitable experience and teachers collaborating. I think my top choice though is your district-wide K-4 option 1 or 7A from the other ones. And I really love the like yin and yang feature of creating these 2 like smaller schools within it, but the shared spaces, which I could see a lot of cool opportunities for, maybe having fourth graders mentor kindergartners, and you're at the same site, so you can do that type of programming, and all the outdoor space, which I think is awesome. Another thing you could think about, though, is the kids that are now further away from their school, maybe they were going to Clark before, busing could be an option as well for some of those kids further away to reduce the number of cars. And, as kids get into 3rd and 4th grade, encouraging more biking and things like that as well in the space to go with our sustainability. But yeah, I'm just really impressed, and that's the option I'm leaning towards. I also like the 3 through 5 options as well. But my top choice would be the K through 4, and then not have to worry about renovating the other buildings later on to bring them up to par with the technology and space. So thank you.
Thank you, Lindsay.
Thank you,
I
Lindsay.
do want to, I want to say that because there have been a couple of, I think David asked earlier about, the 3 elementary school and just doing Hadley. I will say that after talking to the faculty and having educational visioning and talking to Pam at length, the superintendent, the top, I would say at this point, the very top priority for, other than equity, just equity, the top priority physically for the district moving forward is to try to start to collect grade-based learning. So all the 1st graders in the same place, or all the 4th graders in the same place, or all the 8th graders in the same place, which is how it is. That seems to have the largest effect on learning and teaching in your town. So whatever form that comes in, whether it's 3 through 5 or K through 4, however that works, that seems to be the one thing that changes the educator's ability and the teacher's ability to teach, and for the whole district to function a little more effectively. So I just wanted to put in a plug for that. That's what we learned about education district-wide.
Thanks, Lee. I appreciate that. Thank you, Lindsay. Sharon Miller, comment?
Unmute yourself, Sharon.
You can unmute.
Hello. Is that better?
That's better.
Oh, thank you for taking the question. I was a parent at Stanley when you could drive up and drop off. Now, I don't know how you pick up in your plan. Like,
So, but can you speak to the traffic flow in the afternoon and reverse, team?
Well, I'll speak to that in a second, and I think that's a really sharp question, a really great one, because in the morning, people come a little more spread out, and they drop kids off in little clusters, and they get in line, and it moves quite smoothly and out. Afternoon is a very different thing. You don't have buses that are all lined up, but what you have are cars and parents who come early. So sometimes I'm guessing, and Rebecca, you probably observed this, 30 or even 45 minutes early, they come and they park in order to wait for the kids. So the interesting thing here is that that's another reason why we try to get as much queuing space on site as possible. Queuing meaning length of cars lined up. So if you imagine in the afternoon, you'd have to park your car out on the street or wait out on the street for your kid to come out to you, or for you to go and get them and bring them back. In this one, we want to get the cars off the street. So in the afternoon, they'd start to come around. This is actually a 2-lane road on the site. So they come around and they would line along, come all the way around and come all the way back. And the kids, just like any elementary school, would have to be let out in pieces and under instruction, maybe one group at a time to get picked up. And then you would continue on and go out. At least what we're doing, and I'll let you return, but at least what we're doing is trying to get all of those cars lined up on the site rather than out in the street. Go ahead.
When we were allowed to pick up like that,
yeah,
for about 4 years, we were allowed to do that. And the queuing does take place, like you said, but unless the child is outside ready to be picked up, that car doesn't move in front of you. So it just backs up. And this was just Stanley family. So if you bring in 2 other sets of schools, 900 kids to queue up at the end of the day is going to be a disaster.
Well, what did they do instead? They actually just park out on the streets? And then,
No, I mean, we were allowed to come right up on the property and queue up right next to the building.
no, what do you do? I mean, now you
Now,
actually,
after Mr. Daniels left, they went back to the old fashioned way where you just pick up, at the building, like you walk up.
right, so your car's out in the neighborhood.
Right, but your car, when I did it, even when you queued up to pick up Colleen, I mean, Colleen was great in the winter or rainy days, but everyone did it. So that the line to queue up would be all the way down to Nason. I mean, you could probably have Stanley families call in, or you might want to talk to Stanley families. I mean, it doesn't affect me. My daughter's gone, but I mean, I feel bad for parents or 900 students that are in one spot to try to, I mean, drop off is one thing, but pick up is a whole other thing.
Rebecca, do you have any, I know you have a lot of experience with this.
Yeah, so we don't believe by any means that every single car can be accommodated on the school campus during pickup times. There likely will be some spill back into the neighborhoods, and that's where the one-way traffic flow pattern comes in to help to alleviate some of that concern. Certainly with the one-way traffic pattern, the roadway will still be 2 lanes wide, so you can still have 1 lane kind of accommodating cars that are parked, or pulled off to the side, waiting to kind of come in and pick up the kids. So there will be some congestion that does happen in the afternoon, certainly. But there are 2 separate pickup areas that will be provided on the school campus. So there will be one separate for the 3 through 4 students towards the back, and there's a very long queuing area between this this pickup area and the K through 2 pickup area that's at the front of the building. So there is a long space for traffic to build up in that space. But there certainly will be delays for vehicles getting out and getting back out onto the streets when they are leaving. So it's not going to be like a free for all, kids all run out to the cars and the cars all disappear within 5 minutes. There will be some backups, but the intent is to try and get as much of that backup onto the school site as possible so that it's not impacting the adjacent roadways. That's really the goal in creating this long queuing space separate from the adjacent roadway.
I guess I would just ask, you might want to actually, allow it for a month and watch it if that's your plan, because as someone that sat in that car lane for 4 years with just one set of children, I would like Rebecca to sit in that lane, for a month and see how it works just for Stanley, and then picture it with Clark and Hadley. But that just going forward, because I'm someone that lived it.
So Sharon brings up an interesting comparison I don't know that we've done. What is the relative length of the queuing proposed versus the length of queuing on the existing Stanley site?
In terms of length of queuing on the existing Stanley site, right now there really isn't any because people are parking in the neighborhood and they're walking in.
But if we return to the experience that Sharon had when it was queuable on site,
it would start backing up before you can get up on the hill.
Right. It's not so much the question of whether it backed up, because I'm sure it did. It's what is the relative increase in queuable area proposed?
And if you don't queue up, or if you don't want people to walk up, then they have to be in the queue if you don't want them to park.
Right. Yeah. With the previous alternative where people could actually pull onto the site, it was about 900 feet of queuing before it would back up onto Orchard Road.
And what's the queuing distance proposed here?
So hang on one second. Just running that measurement for you. So it will be about 1,250 feet before it hits back onto Orchard Road.
Got it. So there is a level of comparison. Thank you, Rebecca.
Yeah, no problem.
Sharon,
And again, there's two queuing areas too. So the longest one that goes around the back of the building.
They usually
that's
send the
one that's
older
about
kids down.
1,250.
Again, Rebecca, they usually will send the older student down to wait with the kindergarten student. So the brother or sister's not waiting alone. So mom isn't going to queue twice. She's going to just go to that one spot.
Yep, understood.
Okay, thank you.
thank you very much, Sharon. Eric Schneider. Make sure you take yourself off mute, Eric. Eric, you're not muted, but we can't hear you. I'm going to let Eric take a look at his microphone. We'll move to Jay Epstein and keep Eric in queue.
Sure.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, Jay, go ahead.
Thanks. I have a few questions. I think if we started looking at the option for where the tennis courts are, that was, yeah, district-wide 3 to 4.
3 to 5.
Yeah, 3 to 5. So I happen to know that the elevation of this building, of this site, is pretty low in relation to, it's kind of like at the bottom of the parking lot where the tennis courts are. So I think that this is like the perfect site for what you're trying to do. And I'm not sure why you just can't make the building higher and fit the 900 students where you have 540 students, why you can't make this building a little taller and maybe a little wider, and you have plenty of fields in walking distance. And if you solve the, with the parking consultant, there's issues with the parking and the drop off for the middle school that need to be addressed. You could solve that problem with this building, with this site. If this option 2, district-wide 3 to 5, became what 7A and 7B, as I know them, what you're planning to do for that. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So I'll start that, and then Jay will tell you a little bit about what we learned and what our thought process was listening to our consultants throughout this. As you can imagine, over the months, every once in a while we say, this is the perfect site, oh my God, and we hope. So the thing about the middle school site is it already has the middle school on it. So in terms of the site, and I realize that this is a different little area of the site, but all the cars and everything, after we talked to Rebecca about the overall parking and queuing and all of the traffic, felt like this isn't just 900 students, this would be plus, 750 more at the middle school. So 1,000 something, students using that site and cars having to get back and forth. So if people are questioning whether 900 kids can get in and out of Stanley, here's just a lot more of them. Couple of the issues with the middle school down there, I agree with you, it's lower. So we actually felt like we could build 4 stories right there, and you kind of just see it, down there in the valley of that spot. So there's something kind of interesting and tucked away about that. I don't think we would go any higher than 4 stories for any kind of elementary school. 3 stories is obviously we would put the smaller kids on the first floor. And if we did expand it, we would use more land. The only other thing that comes up here, other than just the quantity of students in that campus area, is the idea that this is actually an Article 97 site. It's a existing parkland and fields. So if we build on this site, we take the tennis courts, and even if we expanded it to 900 and took the field next to it, the baseball field, to make that fit, we actually have to relocate that same amount of land and field somewhere else in town that doesn't have it. And that in your town of Swampscott, having studied just about every site that was available from the beginning on, is a real challenge. As a matter of fact, I can't think of any place to put all those fields, those extra fields and stuff, unless we somehow bought more land in a place. I don't know even where that is. You'd have to buy private land somewhere to make that happen. So that is a real issue in using the area down there for the middle school site. Sounds a little depressing, I know, but we've run into a lot of walls here.
Okay, well, I'm certainly not suggesting taking the Little League fields. So let's look at what I know of as 7A and 7B for a sec. Yeah, so I followed along. I understand the queuing all the way from Orchard Circle into the top right, that drop off. So, and you describe there's a second entry level over by Upper School 3-4. So as we see it on paper, everybody, I think a lot of people, this is a little more favorable. I just want to hear you say or make sure, this could win, this could be the best. But what we don't see and what we don't want to see is a road from Forest Ave Extension through the Unitarian Church to this site. If that ever presented during the last minute, that would be a deal breaker. Do you understand what that means?
Well, so I'm just going to ask you, I'm as a kind of an innocent bystander, as the architect, I'm just going to ask you why. I mean, that's fair, right?
Of course. For the same reason that we have all the traffic that's coming and going for the middle school, which I think could be managed just by redesigning, having 2, maybe 3 lanes pulling in instead of that single lane, and people dropping off. There was some beautification. There is a small park, and it's a great feature. Don't get me wrong. But if what you're really trying to do is manage that many cars coming and going, something has to give. But I started off with saying the Unitarian Church, it's private property. I just hate to see that not on paper while you're going through your community outreach, and then you change that. So if you're going to present that later on, I will put it on paper now so everybody can kind of see what is in your pocket, if that's what you have.
Jay, thanks for the comments. I will say that, I've spoken with the town, and if the Stanley location is the right location, and if dual access points are the right configuration, the town is committed to doing, whatever it's going to take to make the right solution happen.
So are we not there yet? Do we not know that's the right solution?
Oh, right now, we got 6 solutions on the table.
Understood. But I think if we have the information, it seems like as we talk about Hadley, as we talk about, each solution, there's compelling reasons why not to do it. And all roads seem, what I see, point to district-wide K through 4, which, when you do a drive-by or a flyover, there's a big field and there's a big old school. So for many reasons, it sort of makes sense. But, having multiple entry points, I understand you can manage kids, here's the lower school, here's the upper school. Then you're going to get into managing parents and automobiles and buses. I just think that's a bit, I think that's, if that's evident and, as we're discussing, then I don't know why we don't see that on paper and hear more from the traffic consultant on that.
Actually, I know, Rebecca, you did have some opinions about the exit point of Forest Avenue Extension onto Humphrey Street.
Yeah, so we did look at the potential for connecting Forest Avenue Extension. That's the shorter piece of Forest Avenue back out onto Humphrey Street, but that really is a pretty narrow roadway and would come into a multi-leg intersection with a lot of congestion and everything. So we didn't recommend that as a primary access point, but we did suggest that could be an emergency vehicle access point, as well as a walking route for pedestrians that are coming in. People are using it today. They walk along Forest Avenue and through the trail that leads through the Ewing Woods and up into the Stanley School. So we would recommend formalizing that path as a walking route into the school there.
I think what I'm hearing from Jay, correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're actually in favor of having just one main access to the K through 4 district-wide Stanley site, as long as on site it turns and it comes out pretty well because you can manage it. And I know that the traffic engineer, although not everybody seems to believe you, Rebecca, but traffic engineer thinks that one access is enough, but obviously you'd have to do things around the neighborhood to make it work better. But then you're talking about the possibility of a pass through the UU church, and I think while that would be, I'm not sure what your position on that is, because obviously your position counts. You don't want to see it later just pop up, and that's what we don't want to do, is have anything pop up. But are you saying that the site should have it or shouldn't have it, or you believe the traffic consultant and whatever that professional says is right? How's that, Jay?
Yeah, no, that's okay. I understand. I think, we don't see where like emergency vehicles will come in. It sounds like Rebecca, from what she said, she did examine coming in for Forest Ave Extension, and she recognizes the intersection at the top of, I don't know, is it Pleasant to Lewis to Humphrey? Yeah, no, I know. But it's very congested over there. There's like 3 or 4 ways, there's like 3 different ways you can go. Maybe for like emergency vehicles to get in, because I'm not sure how you're going to get an emergency vehicle close to the building without driving right straight through Orchard Circle area, right over where it says play, and drive it right up to the front door. Oh, it does say service.
I think, Jay, that was the intent, is that the small Forest Ave extension on that lower right side of that drawing would be a connection for emergency vehicles, police, fire, that kind of thing, because it's just which would be which would only be an emergency or at certain times. And I think that's a perfect place for those people to be able to get in and out separately.
So let me ask you, just to clarify. Okay, so you said the lower left, right, where it says entry level plan, Because you
No.
know Forest Ave Extension is sort of on both street. Well, you have Forest Ave and then you have Forest Ave Extension, which is on the right side.
Right, there's two places. The smaller street on the right, and I hope I meant to say right, to the down to Humphrey Street. That little one would be emergency for sure.
Okay,
Right at that
okay.
little bend right there.
Okay. Now what about, now drag your cursor to the left.
Yeah, that one. So to the UU side.
Yeah, so tell me about what your plans are for that.
Well, right now our plans are not to connect through that area. We had spoken with the UU Church, and they were not in favor right now of doing that, or of having that be a thing that they wanted to work with us on. So we are focused on the main entrance right now. But
Okay.
Mike McClung from the town has said that the town is open to whatever is necessary.
Well, I think it's clear in all of these options, there are going to be trade-offs no matter what. Hang on one second.
Okay,
And
I understand.
the question is, you have a single entry point. Whitman Road can only grow so wide. I don't think you can get 3 lanes there, but maybe you could impinge on some of the neighbors there. It's all going to be a trade-off about who's affected where with what. So we instructed the traffic consultant to work as though we were only limited to entrance and exit through Whitman Road, except for emergency service vehicles. If it turns out, and I really want you to embrace the fact that we are still in the process of developing these designs. If it turns out that a second point of access and egress through the UU Church is absolutely essential, the town is going to do what it can to make that a reality.
Yeah, understood. Well, thanks for talking about it and answering my questions and addressing them. Appreciate it.
I appreciate
Thanks, Jay. It's good to talk to real people and with real voices. We haven't been able to do that before.
Okay, well, thank you for the kind words.
Thank you, Jay. We'll turn to Maura Lau. Maura, unmute yourself, please.
Hi, folks. How are you tonight?
Great.
Great. Thanks for taking my hand. Looking at all the options, and I have been kind of, watching and following, certainly on Zoom here and throughout the year, as the options kind of grew and now have shrunk. I'd like to just sort of make a couple of points. So sort of looking back at the location in the middle school. So I kind of felt I voted no on that location because the location itself and having that many students in that area really frightened me. It kind of alarmed me to think, like, how can we navigate through these sort of bendy roads to get students, if there was sort of a bigger emergency. I do think looking at your location and plan, the direction that you have the school, it's not in the bowl. I think it's a much better layout, certainly than the one that was declined. I think that, I think it plays out a lot better, and it does have more safety features. There's better access points to get at students. So I don't love it, but I certainly like it better than the last plan, which was I was not in favor of. I do think that Hadley, as much as I love Hadley, both my kids went through Hadley, I don't see it working. I don't see that it's going to, I don't think it's going to provide enough options for enough students. I'm looking fully at the Stanley site as saying, okay, how can we know nothing moves very aggressively here in this little town. How do we, in this movement, get the most students impacted in a positive way? And I really see that happening at the Stanley location. I'm looking at saying, okay, 900 students is a terrific amount of students. And I'm assuming that's all of our K-4 population. And then we have the kids who I think, truthfully, that younger grades who have been left with the fewest options in terms of buildings for far too long in our town. I think then they're going to get a stronger start, and I think that that is sort of the way to go. I really do. So one question I just have, that's my opinion, but I want to go back real quickly. I know that this is off the table, but the Phillips site, I just had a quick question as to why was it that the Phillips was looked at the back, kind of at the back of where the football field was, and not really looked at up front where the baseball field is? If there's a quick answer to that, if that's not an answer you want to give, that's fine too.
I can, thank you, Maura.
You've got chapter and verse on that.
Yeah, I can answer that. Well, first of all of the Phillips site has its environmental, floodplain, brownfieldish kind of issues. So in some ways, it didn't matter. Once we learned all about the Phillips site, putting a school there would be extraordinarily expensive and difficult, no matter where you put it on the whole site. The reason we put it in the back was because there were less, there was space back there, and an area where it wasn't being utilized efficiently. And so you could drive right in and see it and come back out again. But even if we had put it in the very front, it would have, for all the reasons that Phillips was taken off the table, it wouldn't have moved forward. And I'd be happy to explain even more, but it was just it's an environmentally challenged location for a building. And any building you build there has to have piles because it's all soggy ground underneath, and it's in a coastal floodplain, so the building probably should be lifted off a whole floor. It's really pretty crazy, all the different things that happen there. So I digress.
Those are great explanations. Thank you
Yeah,
for being so.
But I want to hear really clearly, just since this is us, if you were to rank like the 2 or 3, you talk through some different sites and options, what would be your first, second, or even third choice right now, knowing what you know?
Certainly. So just to kind of give you some context, I have 4 children. I have 2 graduates. So we've been, we've been through the whole system. My youngest is in 5th grade, and my next youngest is going into 8th grade. So I am really mindful of the fact, and I'm an early ed person. They're very mindful of the strong start, strong finish. That is, that's just our mantra in early ed. So I'm really mindful of servicing and getting those younger grades together. So the K4 full, citywide, townwide is really a priority to me, which is why Stanley appears to be the best from my eyes.
Thank you.
Can I just add one last quick thing? The only thing, I know when we kind of, last year and the year before, when we were sort of looking at educational goals, we were really looking to get the 5th grade back down, to that elementary level. I've listened to I understand why, we just don't have the space to do it. That would be sort of my only, disappointment, that we're not getting the 5th grade really kind of back in. But I do understand we don't have the space to do it.
Well, or the 3 through 5 does that, of course.
Right, but it
but it's not giving that K1-2, that strong start, and it's not also getting those early grades all together in one building, which I think is really a priority.
Maura, I want to thank you for bringing up and kind of thoughtfully walking through the different challenges we've had. And I think I speak for the committee as a whole when I say we have had to face trade-off after trade-off after trade-off. And none of us is as mindful of that as I am, that some things in the educational vision have to be sacrificed for other things in the educational vision. I wish that weren't so.
And one last thought too is thinking ahead in terms of, at some point the middle school building is aging, and we might need some swing space to build for that. So that's kind of sort of a long-term thought too, is if, we put a new site there, then we're going to kind of short ourselves some space down the road.
Fair point.
Thank you.
Thank you, Maura. Kristen Bredimus. You'll need to unmute, Kristen.
Hi, thank you so much. I'm in full support of building a new school that supports district-wide K through 4, since there are issues with each of the existing elementary schools. I come with a historical perspective of the first round of elementary renovations that were proposed. And I also have the perspective of having a child who ultimately attended one of the existing elementary schools and has experienced health issues resulting from air quality of one of the existing schools. So I have a real incentive for all of the children to have a healthy learning environment. One of my concerns is that in looking at, especially with the middle school in Stanley, those options, it feels like you've taken into consideration all the existing challenges that were presented the first time around, but there's still question marks. I also have the perspective of being a Nason Street homeowner. So I'm battling the Stanley traffic to get to my son's school, which isn't Stanley. And I personally feel that you've done a great job of anticipating the problems. But my sense is that some of my neighbors will still have a hard time coming into support of the options, specifically the middle school or Stanley, because of these existing traffic concerns. I wonder if in some future conversations and planning, if there's a way to talk about and think about how the school will, how the town will ultimately monitor the traffic. Because right now there's, as you know, lots of traffic issues, and even when they've been raised, in terms of sometimes it's speed limits, sometimes it's signage, because these streets now are filled with young neighborhood kids who go to elementary school. There hasn't been a lot of support or response. So my point being that I think that you've done a fabulous job of presenting options, but I'm still concerned that because of those tactical pieces that the town will ultimately have to support, that it may leave residents concerned about whether or not they will do so.
Fair enough.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Schneider, Eric Schneider. See if your microphone's working now. Make sure to unmute.
Can you hear me now?
Yes. Good job.
Yes, sorry about that. Well, first I wanted to thank the committee and its volunteers and the project manager for an excellent job. You know, we've watched the presentations on Zoom and on local access, and they've been very informative, and it seems like we're all, you know, benefiting from a very thorough process. So thank you. Just as background, you know, we have 3 kids, you know, one in the elementary school now, a preschooler, and a very young child who hopefully will be able to attend, you know, this new school, you know, regardless of what the configuration is. But wanted to, you know, just say that my preference is to build a new school as a 3 through 5 at the Hadley site. I think it fits best within the articulated community priorities. It is appropriate in size and character, and fits the town. It preserves a precious open space, since each of the other options involves loss of open space. It's more central located, especially when you consider the density and the traffic data from the presentation that was done on March 24th, where, you know, it shows that 510 students live within 1 mile of the Hadley site, and I think it was just under 300 within the Stanley site. And even looking at the traffic changes, I think Rebecca projected, or Rebecca's team an increase at the Hadley site of 68% in traffic, but at the Stanley site, it would be 277%. So because it's more centrally located, it would be the most accessible site for use by the community, which is also one of the priorities. Doing the 355 at Hadley would retain Clark and Stanley, though old, but it would be a small neighborhood schools for our littlest learners. So their transition from preschool or from home to the school environment may be a little less intimidating than going to a 900-person school. And then it also has the benefit of moving the 5th grade out of the middle school, which has long been a priority for the district. And I think on the traffic side, a couple other thoughts is at the Stanley site, I think the queuing is a little, I don't know if misleading is the right word, but since half the students are coming out of the lower school door, presumably, the queuing length there is much shorter than for the so-called upper school. And the whole lineup of the cars all around the building really discourages anybody from walking, since essentially there's like a fortress of cars around the building. And then I think looking at just beyond the school site, just looking where the traffic is coming from, if you think of all the traffic going to the Stanley site, it would be coming down one way through Humphrey or down Forest and then to Nason. So it's not just the effect just around the school, but sort of ripple down through the neighborhoods. And then I think one of the last disadvantages of Hadley is, as I mentioned, you'd lose Clark and Hadley as school sites. And I know there's been some thought about using Clark as for the administration, but I think sounds like we'd lose Hadley, like we have a bunch of other schools in town that now are missed. Think about the old middle school site, the Mahon School, and wasn't there one more? But I digress. So that was that. Thank you.
I just want to say that that was extremely strategic thinking, and kind of like having paid attention all the way through and said all those different things about why, was very thoughtful, especially about the 3 through 5, which, I mean, one way to look at this is what option gets you the most value for your money and checks off the most boxes without having a thing that stops it from being, that one big thing that stops you from supporting it. And I really appreciated all the things that you just said, Eric.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Eric. I'm going to move on to Casey Hubney. More allow, you still have your hand up. I don't know if that's intentional. Casey, you need to unmute.
Thank you very much for all the work you've done on the project and presenting it all to our community. It's been wonderful. I was wondering, first of all, could you put the slide back up that has the survey on it? It disappeared maybe 45 minutes or so ago.
Casey, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you. I don't know about others.
Yeah, we can't hear either.
I think she asked to have the slide that had the survey on it back up. I think she said that the slide disappeared and she wanted to write down that survey information.
Yeah, I've received a number of emails from folks. I'm asking someone from the committee to forward back out the link just to be sure. And I know
It's
Casey,
also on the school building committee website, so anyone can go directly to the school building committee website, and that link will be right there near the top.
So I'm going to leave Casey there for a moment, and I'm going to move to some of the questions I've received by email and text. I'm going to start off with a question from Mary Ellen, who asks, has there been a cost savings to the town with an energy efficient building been identified? And do we have any forecasts?
We don't have the exact operating costs yet. David, do you want to speak to that? Are there some percentages we can think of or anything like that?
Yeah, to be honest, it's quite early in the process. We've started to look at the initial design of the building envelope. Obviously, we're targeting a very high performing envelope, and we're looking at very energy efficient systems, including geothermal. But it's really quite early in the process, and I would not want to mislead anyone at this point by giving a guess. But I can say that the town has made a high priority for energy efficiency. There is what we call an EUI, or energy usage intensity target for this building that we take very seriously. And I can guarantee that EUI will be very far above the performance of your existing school buildings. So the answer is yes, this building will certainly be more energy efficient than anything else in town. And we can fine tune what those actual percentages will be, those projections, as we develop the design.
One of the important things towards that, I'm sorry that we don't have an exact number right now because that has to be calculated. All of these new buildings would have that goal and would save lots of money. But having renewable energy sources like geothermal, which heats and cools a building from the ground, and having photovoltaic panels on the roof, which basically gives you some free electricity, are all ways for us to save money nowadays, and luckily have become commonplace just in the last few years after a lot of pushing and pulling. And the MSBA, one thing that they do really, really well is really support these energy efficient buildings. So in the future, I think this will be the most of the size, most energy efficient building you have in town, and maybe a model for moving forward.
Thanks, Lee. I'm going to move on to the next question that came in by email from Lori, who wanted to express support for what was known as Scheme 7A, which provides more equity across grades than a 3 to 5 school. The traffic consultant found a way to get more cars on the site to minimize parking on side streets. No temporary facilities are required to house students. Site is shielded from neighbor houses by the tree lines. Maximum potential number of parent drop-off is 3 as opposed to 4 if we go with the 3 to 5 option. The town will not be left with 2 school buildings to renovate. And that was all. That was a comment. Claire asks, can you address the sustainability of the Hadley site in terms of sea level rise?
That might be the easiest question we have all day, because for some reason the Hadley site has very low groundwater, like really deep, and is not in any kind of floodplains, right, David? So maybe that's why it's kind of perched up there a little bit. So the Hadley site, as far as the geotechnical and all of the environmental and all the history shows, is a very dry site.
I believe, if I recall from the stormwater survey that we did regarding the coastal resiliency, if Hadley is at risk from sea level rise, half the town is already underwater.
Yeah, they'll have to make a movie out of that if that happens.
Yes. Jill asks, what will happen to Hadley if they move to the K through 4 Stanley plan? And I actually think I'm, if you'll excuse me, probably the best person to answer this. As I know, the selectmen are putting that topic on an upcoming agenda for one of their next few meetings. They haven't had public discussions of it yet, but I know they're mindful of the need to discuss it. Next, I'm going to move to some texts that I've gotten from questions coming in from other folks. Let's start off. Gabriella asked a question that was, I believe, already asked, and that's the why not start an option to bus children like nearly every other school district in America. I will say that I think Martha Seibert had to leave, so I don't know if Martha Raymond feels qualified to comment on the budget
I can just say that the regulations in terms of busing are, we would have to bus any student K to 6 that it lives over 2 miles from an elementary site. So it's very possible with the Stanley site, we may have some areas where we would have to bus, especially over by the Michon area that would be over 2 miles. So some busing would be involved. The cost is usually about $300 a day per day for the bus, for one school bus.
So you probably haven't done these figures. I don't know if Martha would have, to expand beyond the, the few families that would be affected by the 2 mile limit to universal busing.
It would be very costly.
Clearly be very costly. I don't know if those numbers have been developed or not.
Well, you figure one bus is about 75 students. We have 2,200 students in the district. You could do that math, although even now in the new COVID world, you can get only 25 students on a 75 person bus.
So what is the K6 population?
About 150 per grade. So 306, about 300, 600, about 9, about K to 4 is about 900, right? And then add another 300 onto that. So,
okay, so
1,200.
1,200 versus an existing 75.
Right.
Bust. So it's a 10, 15x factor or so.
Yeah, it's a lot. I also would say that I think, one of the real positive parts of our community is the walking piece. And one thing I do notice is a lot of people are walking right now, and a lot of kids are riding bikes. And so maybe that's something that we will be able to continue.
Got it. Thank you, Martha. And I'm going to finish, unless I see other hands up or anyone else. Oh, Lisa Julian Hayes, I'll ask you before I go to my final text message. Can we invite Lisa to speak? Thanks, Lisa. Please unmute.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, thank you.
All right, I am Lisa Julian Hayes, and I am the chair of the CPAC for the district. That stands for Special Education Parents Advisory Council. And I want to thank everyone for their hard work and just going over all of these different plans and the obstacles you're facing, because I know this is just the most challenging task that most of you have embarked on in quite some time. And I want to share my support for a district-wide school K4 option 1. And if that were not to happen because of funding, as a backup plan, I think the only other logical choice is a 3-5, because right now, special education students do not get a fair and equitable education building-wise. We have several families that have asked me to speak that have kids who've had to actually utilize 3 different schools because of education plans. That's not acceptable. And I think, neighborhood wise, yes, some people may not agree where the new school will be, walking, busing, there's so many other factors, but the main goal for me representing these families is a fair education where they can access all of their services in one place and not have to have OTs and PTs going to different schools. It's just not working the way it is right now. And I think that I'd love everyone to consider the possibility of the K4. And again, if that was not to work or budget-wise, it just wasn't the proper timing, then at least a 3-5 where those students could utilize all of the services in one building together, specifically by grade.
Thank you, Lisa. I appreciate it. Okay, for our final questioner tonight, we are giving the award of the most thorough questioning to Jaren, who asks 4 different questions. I'll take them one at a time. Number 1, what are the MSBA recommendations for the buildings to conform with the existing neighborhood? The 3-story option does not.
The MSBA recommendations would be that the architect and the town build a building that is in scale and in code and in character with the space around it. I understand that, Jaren, I wish I could talk to you in real person, with your words, but.
Why, Jared? Jared
Oh,
just raised your hand.
He raised his hand, so I'm gonna
Raise your hand. Go ahead.
allow him to speak.
Her, thank you.
Her.
Jared, you need to unmute. Thank you.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, hi, Jaren. I have I've tried to answer some of your questions, and I've seen your letters as well. So I have put a lot of, myself, I've put a lot of thought into your questions. I realize that you don't believe or feel like a 3-story option is appropriate. I guess I don't. I usually am not controversial or anything. I just don't really agree. But that's a matter of taste, I suppose. I've done 3-story and 4-story schools but I think 4 stories is a little much here. But I understand your concern, and that's one of the reasons why we developed a 2-story option for yourself and for a couple others who asked that question.
Yes, I had recommended it early on because I, saw our town going. I would have voted for a school at Stanley the last go around, personally, and I was worried that the building committee would get down a path of the Stanley site and only have one option. And so I had asked Suzanne to consider a lower option. I'm not adjacent or abutting of the property, but I just, feel that I do live across from the middle school, which is 2 stories also on a hill, and it feels very large to me as a neighbor. We knew that going in when we purchased our home. And I think that a 3-story option, 1 story on top of that, would feel very large for that neighborhood. And so, so the second question I had is, what is the square footage of the play space in the 2 versus the 3-story option? I wanted to see what you gain. And there's also the ledge, on that field, and it's already built up, and I spent pretty much every day between March and June down there, because that's where we did our recess every day. And I kept looking at it and even took some photos, on those days of just how high it seems. And then to have 3 stories on top of that, I feel, maybe seen from all of the neighbors on Laurel Road, Nason Road, it just feels very large and non-conforming with the neighborhood, in my opinion. So I wanted to, better understand what the square footage is of the play space, and if either of the options are, are large enough for 900 students.
So I really appreciate that you sent a letter earlier, so I could do research on that, and we could put together some numbers for you. As you can see can you see the screen right now?
I can.
Okay, on the option 1, at the very bottom of the purple, you'll see it says play space 74,000 square foot. So for the 3-story option, what we did was we just outlined and measured the green space that you could play on, not the hard scape or anything like that. So the field, the patio, and that whole area of play in the back. That is it's actually a wonderfully large bit of land to play on. And I think you'll also notice that we're very careful not to put roads between the school and those play areas for safety, and so that it's kind of an island. I think you'll notice that. So then you go over to the option 2, which is 2-story, which obviously has a bigger footprint. And it had, at the bottom of the purple, it says 60,000 square foot plus Ewing Woods. So that's about 14,000 square foot difference. You can judge what 14,000 square foot is. 1,000 square foot is about the size of a good large classroom. So that is the size of 60 large classrooms. I mean, that's a way to look at it, or the field. I talked to our landscape architect, and I asked her for different enrollments, but for 900 student school, what's kind of their minimum that they would recommend for play area? And we're talking about, in this case, a play area like, play equipment. She actually just gave me a number from their playground person of 10,000 square feet. I think that's really small. You know what I mean? I think you would agree with me that 10,000 square foot is probably minimum for that number of kids. Also considering that you probably, obviously you bring out certain number of kids at a certain time. So we'd have a K-2 area and a 3-4 area, and they come out at different times during the day as they cycle through. But these two, because Stanley is larger, is a large site, there's actually a generous amount of play space compared to the two, and there's about a 14,000 square foot difference. I don't know what to do with that other than say that the actual play area field on the 2-story is where we pretty much took it all out. So it's this very skinny slot. And maybe there's not a play field on that site. Maybe it's handled differently. And, you know, so it's really up to what everybody thinks as it goes. Is that a good, strong answer?
It is. I'll have to look and see if I have from the last go around when we calculated the size of the field at Clark, the field at Stanley, and then, you know, the play space at Hadley to kind of have a comparison, because I don't have that sense of what 74,000 square feet looks like. Like, what's the size of the field right now at Stanley? Do you know?
Well, it's obviously, if you take that play field down in the option 1 and then extend it all the way across, it's obviously bigger because we're putting on a bigger building and we're putting on roads and parking that you don't have on site right now. We're trying to utilize the site. I mean, it's bigger, so the field, the play field is obviously smaller. We're trying to put the play areas in places that work for this design.
But to help with visualization, you know, so people have a sense of comparison, especially people who spent a lot of time on those fields. Jaron has, as I have, anyone who went to Stanley knows. What is the current play space in that area? And I'm trying to see if I can get a quick Google Earth answer to that. Meanwhile, Jaron, I think your
I had more
emergency access was answered, but
it was answered or it wasn't answered.
We talked. What is your question, Jaron?
So I know there was some discussion earlier about a second egress, and I heard the discussion about the church. My question that I had, and I asked Suzanne this question earlier, and she didn't know the answer yet. But my question was, you know, the last go around, we were told that that site was ruled out because there was no second egress for emergencies, and that's what the building committee told us. And when there was a last minute, you know, switch to the middle school. And so my question is, you know, so I have 2 more questions, but this is the second of the 3. My question is a second egress required or not? And, you know, for fire emergency access, and, you know, is this locked up? Is the second egress, you know, finalized, determined? You know, because I feel that in order for it to be a viable site, if that is still required, you know, we need to know exactly what that emergency access plan is prior to the committee voting.
Right. Well, I think there's a difference between having, I just want to clarify, difference between having access points for all the cars coming in and out of a site and having a second like emergency.
Yeah,
our plan, right?
So, an emergency egress. Yeah, just like at the high school that's locked off. You know, there's the at the high school it's closed. You know, 100% of the time it's closed.
Right. So it would be the easiest thing to do is to take the smaller Forest Ave extension. You know, the smaller street there, and just have there can be a little connector right there at the bottom of this drawing, like to the right in the bottom. And that could be an emergency in and out. And that's fairly simple. And I really don't think it would affect the people on that smaller street at all, because it's just for emergency vehicles if such a thing were to happen. And I think that in terms of codes and all of that, really, it comes down to our meetings with the local fire marshal, the police chief, people like that and what they want for access and for getting around and getting through. We've done a lot of schools, so we know what they usually like. But in this case, they're going to, in this case, they're going to want to have good access. So I think that we've shown a reasonable plan on this site for a second emergency.
But that was the identical plan to the last time, the identical, which we were told the whole site was ruled out for this reason.
I can't, I wasn't there.
Yeah, it's hard to draw comparisons to what another committee and another set of technical experts have recommended. I do want to point out, not online tonight, I don't think, and I don't want to put words in his mouth, but we do have our Fire Chief Emeritus, Kevin Breen, on the committee.
Okay. I just want to make sure, if you're going to go down this path, that it's viable, right? And
so Karen, I'm going to tell you what I think I remember hearing about one of the reasons why the site was switched. Because we tried to study the old plans as best as we could just to understand them. And I understand that there was a switch near the end. The old plan actually had have people coming in, all the people coming in on Whitman and going out on the Forest Ave connector, which is the small street that goes down to Humphrey. In other words, they had kind of this, everybody come in and then go through the site and then go back out. Or it was flipped, but it's essentially the same thing. So it wasn't that it was, maybe it wasn't that it was an emergency, it was that they had all of those people going down that little street. And one of the lessons learned that we took was, we're not putting all those people, all those cars down that little street.
I don't remember that. I remember it being a locked second egress, but I could be mistaken. And then the last part of my question, so I think that just needs to be confirmed before.
Yeah, I'm sure that technical consultants will not let us proceed with a plan that doesn't have adequate fire and emergency egress and access.
Okay.
Yeah, and so the last piece was just a suggestion after hearing Sharon Miller's, I thought, very thoughtful, comment, which is, why not do a dry run, right? Have the elementary parents or whoever, drive, do a sample drop off one morning. If we have 900 feet now, and you said it would be 1250, if that went smoothly, after trying it, a couple of times, or I think that could be very helpful, for the neighborhood if that is a concern. So, I think a dry run might be useful there, right? You could mark off that extra couple hundred feet in the queue. I was also at the school. In fact, it was my suggestion to Mr. Daniels to try this rolling drop off, and I loved it personally. I thought it was great. I was disappointed when it ended, especially when it was snowing every which way. But, I think, it is triple the volume of cars almost. And so I think, having proof that it works might be helpful.
Rebecca, do you have any examples of people who have done dry runs or really gotten into it in that way? It sounds like a great idea.
Yeah, I've seen dry runs of various options for pickup and drop off, but not to the point where a school doesn't exist there. So asking parents whose kids currently go to a different school to drive over to this area and drop off. But I don't see a reason why it couldn't be done as an option.
Rebecca, don't you have, since you do scores of schools like this, of even much larger schools, right? You know the queuing distances, the timing. There's a whole calculation to this, where you have a certain number of cars, the kind of drop-offs, the way that they move, the queuing, and all that. Maybe we could do something that's more technical looking, that shows the real pathway, where the cars are, how many there could be, how they move through the site in a certain amount of time, and then especially in the afternoon, where they can park, where they can wait, and how they get out if they're in a line, how they can pull out and get away, stuff like that as the kid comes out. We would have to do kind of a graphic that's tied to a to solve this problem for everybody's question, because the real problem is everybody needs to know, and that's not really a problem. We need to do some kind of way of showing this, even if it was a animated graphic that shows how it works, and show out the streets in the background to show that it's not falling out onto the streets. Is there a way to do that, or is that crazy?
No, there are simulation models that you can do to show what that pickup and drop off activity would look like, and people stopping to drop off and how far back the queues would extend.
Everything I'm hearing tonight, and Jaren, your question just backs it up, is Stanley's pretty good, except what about the traffic, queuing, traffic, and traffic? And
yeah, I don't know if that, I mean, so I feel that in the absence of having a master plan, and I was a member of the task force, and that was the first thing we recommended that happen. And,
right.
So without the town and the schools creating that, I personally would have a hard time supporting a different option that precludes development at the middle school eventually, or accounts for K-2. So, so for me, not having the master plan limited the committee's options. To these two options, that's just my opinion, because we wouldn't have no future plan for, how we're going to address K-2, or, any development, or putting a 3 to 5, at a different location. You have the K-2, or if it's at the middle school, preclude future development of the middle school. So for that reason, I feel that Stanley is the only option, because there is no forward planning, long range planning. And that was an issue last time as well. But, I am concerned about the conforming of the neighborhood, and we don't have many 3-story buildings, certainly not in any neighborhoods except Hadley. And I'm worried about that, and I'm worried, how that's sort of going to look. So seeing a better 3D model of the 2-story versus the 3-story would be helpful to me as well.
Jaren, may I recommend that maybe you reach out to me directly, and I can set up a meeting with the architectural team and a few of the other committee members that goes over a lot of your concerns and questions a little bit more in depth than you were bound to receive on this broadcast. So that way, just to kind of help facilitate and get all your answers answered, because we're not trying to dismiss them by any means, but maybe this isn't the right forum to go into depth on all of them.
Yeah, but it's not just me that you're going to have to convince. It's all the neighbors in Nason, Laurel, Forest Avenue Extension that are going to potentially see that 3-story building. So,
absolutely, and
I think it needs to be addressed for all of those neighbors.
So maybe what I guess I should ask then is, like, if I can meet with you, have a conversation with you, and tie in the architectural team as well, so that we can better understand what the concerns might potentially be and how we can address them better in the future. Like, I guess I'm kind of asking you to be an assistant in that means, to help get us to understand what the real concerns and how maybe is the best way to communicate those.
Okay, well, if you want to send me your contact information, I'd be happy to, learn as much as I can so that I can be an advocate.
Vivian, I think you should have her email. I think the whole committee has received Jaren's communications.
Perfect.
And I do want to say that Jaren has a great idea to facilitate that conversation, particularly with understanding a 3D representation. But I think it's important to understand, not in a traditional rendering, but instead, as Jaren rightly points out, what portion of the school can be seen from those abutters locations. Because usually in the 3D renderings, you're imagining you're standing in a complete blank, empty space.
Right, and you're not necessarily able to see from like your
Right.
home what you might just see the top of the building.
Yeah. And I do think we're probably talking less than a handful of vantage points, given that there's no abutters on at least one side of the property.
Right, so Jaren, thank you so much for tonight's your comments, and I will be reaching out to you.
And I just want to say that my super unscientific assessment of the existing playing field at Stanley using Google Earth shows that at approximately 72,000 square feet. And our crack technical team at Local Access Cable, Joe Dulett, informs me that a football field, for reference sake, is 57,600.
We do have one other individual, Doug Dublin, has raised his hand. So I'm going to ask him to speak.
Hey, Doug. Unmute yourself, please, Doug.
Hello, how are you?
Great.
So I've been a resident of Orchard Circle and Orchard Road for approximately 50 years. I went to Stanley School. My house backs up to Stanley School. I grew up on Orchard Circle right here. I've worked in all the schools pretty much, done a lot of different stuff. I am in favor of a new school because I know we need it. Jaren came up with that great point of trying to put 1,200 cars up to Stanley School. I've seen every scenario, from Stanley School mothers to John DePietro telling the mothers to not stop in the middle of the road because their kids are late, to let them out of the car to get people up there. I think that's one of the biggest concerns, is getting it. The 3-story, a 2-story, I think if it's designed right, it's going to work up there. I don't really want to see it right there. I've lived here my whole life. Eric that talked earlier, I really enjoyed listening to his numbers that he came up with of the kids trying to put it at Hadley School and where to put it. I'm still in favor of small neighborhood schools like this and everyone trying to walk. Stanley got a grant to put sidewalks in all around Stanley School here, and it's basically, my opinion, hindered the plowing. It's got a lot of people flat tires, and there are 10 bicycles that ride to Stanley School and park up there, where that was the whole purpose, is to get it up there. You guys have done a great job in researching this whole thing. I'll be very listening for our next meeting, and all I'm really looking for is the best we can for Swampscott and everybody like that. And that's all I have to say right now, but thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Doug. Okay, I am out of questions that have come in through email, Facebook, text. I don't see anyone else with hands up. I want to express my appreciation for everybody who's attended the call, has attended the meeting, and been so patient and raised such thoughtful questions. And I want to thank the committee for all the work getting us here and all the work yet to come, as well as our technical experts and our professional consultants for being so giving of their time and being so well prepared for this conversation. Vivian, I think that's it from me.
Thank you, Michael. And as stated earlier, we do have a link for the online survey. Please, please, we ask all of you to go online, run through the survey, and let your voices and your opinion be heard. If you need additional information, or if you have any other questions that might not have been raised tonight, please don't hesitate to reach out to your committee members as well as to any of us, and we will be more than happy to elaborate and give you as much detail as you need. All of our presentations from past public forums are on the website and can be easily accessed. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to reach the SBC as well. We will have another session, the Design Options Review 2 for September 8th. And once we have narrowed down all of these options, we will come back to you and present the preferred design option and review once again with this group. We thank you all and appreciate your comments, your feedback, your thoughtful questions, and for your time. Have a great night, everybody.
Good night.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night, everyone.
Good night. You guys were great. Lee, awesome.
Thank
Thanks,
you, everybody.